As Israel weighs its response to a barrage of missiles from Iran over the weekend, that country's nuclear ambitions are an ongoing concern with the building tensions in the region, as the Sydney Morning Herald's Peter Harcher explains.
Well, it was a decisive moment, and the head of Iran's own, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has described it as a new paradigm. So even the Iranians are openly stating that it is a completely new way of operating, because until now, the Iranians have attacked Israel for 40 years, but mainly through, only through proxies. Hezbollah, Hamas, more lately the Houthi rebels. But now we have an open and direct murderous act of war directed at another state. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So it's a decisive change. It is a new paradigm, as the the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps leader says. But I would also say, Bev, curiously, for such an open and direct declaration and act of war, it was also quite cautious, because the Iranians have a lot more firepower than they chose to use. This was a very limited barrage, 350 missiles and armed drones, but only over a few hours. And as soon as they'd finished, they said, that's it, we're not intending any more. So why would you do that? It wasn't really designed to cripple Israel or disarm Israel. It was a very careful, calibrated, and I would suggest cautious one-off attack. The Iranians seemed to think they needed to protect their credibility in the face of, as you said, the Israeli attack on the Iranian diplomatic compound in Syria, in which the head of the Quds force was killed and other Iranian senior officers. And having made their point, proved their credibility in wanting to punish Israel, they stepped back and said, but that's it, we don't want a war. We don't want a full-on war, guys, please. So it was decisive yet cautious.
Yes, indeed. So, and even the US has said to Israel, take this as a victory for that very point. And then pointedly, we will not support you in any further escalation. So what is Israel's war cabinet contemplating right now?
Well, the dilemma for Netanyahu and the war cabinet more broadly is they have an opportunity now. The Iranians, with this direct act of war, have given Israel an opportunity, if it should want to take it, to degrade or damage Iranian capability and military capability, which one day, Iran's declared objective is the destruction of Israel and wiping out, removing all the Jews. So, ultimately, all of the Iranian capability is directed at the destruction of the Jewish state and the Jewish people. This gives the Israelis an opportunity now to degrade or destroy some of their military capability. Now, that's pretty tempting if you're Israel, especially because Israel's greatest fear, which is an Iranian nuclear bomb, and the Iranians have for a long time been working on and have now amassed, according to the latest inspection from February of the inspectors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN inspectorate body, about 120 kilos of enriched uranium in the Iranian nuclear labs. That's enough to make at least 3 nuclear warheads. So they have that capability. They haven't yet mastered how to put it on a warhead, on a missile that's deliverable into Israel. But that's their intention. Now, what Israel has here is an opportunity, maybe you could even call it an invitation, with this Iranian attack on Israel, for Israel to now conduct an airstrike to degrade as much as they can of the Iranian nuclear infrastructure. They can't hit it all. Much of it is buried beneath a mountain, but there are exposed bits where Israel could do serious damage. So that's tempting. That's tempting. And that would be broadly supported by the Israeli public, you would have to expect, and based on past opinion polling. On the other hand, you've got, as you said, the US, its great and indispensable ally, plus the French and the British, which all of whom helped defend Israel on the weekend under its barrage from Iran. All of those capitals, Washington, London, Paris, have said, Netanyahu, do not escalate. We do not want a full-on war in the Middle East.
Yeah. And to your point, Peter, everyone feels the tensions are incredibly high. We know Netanyahu has these domestic pressures that is probably driving a lot of what he's doing, but targeting Iran's potential nuclear capabilities, and to your point, to wipe it out now because they have been concerned about this, Israel, they've been saying this for years. Could this not really set off a wide-scale conflict that would be very hard to contain?
Well, exactly. So that's one of the risks that the Israelis would take if they went ahead and retaliated. The head of the chief of staff of the Israeli military has said in the last hours that Israel will respond. The Americans, the Brits, the French and others are saying, OK, respond, but let's make it diplomatic. Let's have some sanctions. Don't go to war. But on the other hand, if you are Benjamin Netanyahu, you've got a few considerations. As you said, you've got his internal politics. He's got his internal coalition government. His national security minister, the leader of one of the far right-wing parties that constitutes his coalition government, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said on the weekend, the boss, Netanyahu, the boss must now go nuts in response. So they're the pressures from within his own cabinet. It would be broadly popular, you'd have to assume, with the Israeli public, even though they're exhausted and frightened after 6 months of this war with Hamas and now this barrage from Iran. And also the other point that you, if you're Netanyahu, are weighing in your mind is that you've seen that Iran, although it's attacked you, doesn't really want and isn't really ready for a full-scale war. So this is signalling a moment of vulnerability for the Iranians. Now, that has to be tempting if you're Israel. But do you then lose a lot of the goodwill that you've just relied on to defend your country, a lot of the goodwill from Washington, London, and Paris, all of whom were very helpful, were instrumental. And in fact, so 99% of the Iranian missiles and drones were intercepted, according to the Israelis. But more than a quarter of those were knocked out of the sky by the Americans, and the Brits and the French were instrumental too. So are you prepared to burn that coalition, or at least some of their goodwill, to pursue this opportunity to strike Iran? That is the dilemma facing Netanyahu.
Yeah, and difficult one indeed. Good to talk as always. Thanks, Peter.
Pleasure, Bev.